The night Diana lost her life in Paris felt long buried, until an unmarked USB stick, a sealed envelope, and a sudden surge of millions of pounds brought the tragedy back into sharp focus. Prince William is pulled into a secret investigation where every thread leads toward the most powerful figures in his own bloodline. A hushed female voice, believed to belong to Camilla's former aide, is heard instructing a delay. A shadowed contract emerges. A cryptic phone call traced to Clarence's house. All of it stacking together into a picture cloaked in suspicion. The USB contained only a single audio file. The voice, distorted yet unmistakably female, whispered about the Paris arrangement, and how certain documents were never meant to see daylight. William listened in silence, each second pressing deeper into memory. Within hours, a sealed envelope arrived at his office, bearing only one line in Diana's unmistakable handwriting: "If they silence me, no, it was no accident." The note, sealed since 1997, had been hidden in a private archive until now. That single letter pushed William further into the shadows of palace secrecy. A dusty archive revealed contracts, signed under aliases, all linking to shell companies across the Channel Islands. The sums, millions, shifted quietly from one account to another, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. One file carried a note marked only with initials. The handwriting was familiar to William, too familiar. It mirrored drafts once belonging to his grandmother. The connection chilled him, yet he pressed on, unwilling to look away. A faintly recorded exchange surfaced next. A woman's voice, hushed but firm, urged, "Not yet. Wait until the transition settles." Investigators close to William believed it was Camilla's former aide, though no proof ever tied the words directly. At Clarence's house, a call log showed an untraceable number placed minutes before Diana's final car ride. The official record claimed it was never connected. Yet the timing gnawed at William, leaving him with more questions than answers. Every clue drew William deeper into a maze built by those closest to him. A locked drawer inside an old royal office revealed a torn contract tied to overseas investments, the ink smudged but the signatures clear. Beside it lay a second envelope, this one unsigned, detailing arrangements to delay press briefings should an incident occur. The phrasing struck like thunder. It was no longer coincidence, it read like orchestration. Financial records, traced through offshore banks, revealed sudden movements of vast sums, millions transferred within days of Diana's death. Each transaction circled back to entities shielded by layers of secrecy, their true owners hidden behind coded initials. One particular account stood out. Its deposits aligned with dates William remembered as key moments in his mother's final months. To him, it no longer looked like coincidence, but like an intentional pattern carved into the numbers. The deeper William dug, the more the evidence seemed to bend back toward Clarence's house. A handwritten note, tucked into an old folder, referenced containment measures and a timeline that matched the weeks before Diana's final trip to Paris. A call, later uncovered in archived security logs, connected briefly to a senior household line. Though the call was cut off in under 30 seconds, the record of its existence refused to disappear. For William, it was another fracture in the official story. Among the recordings was one more disturbing than the rest. The same veiled female voice whispered, "Delay the release until approval comes from above." No name was spoken, yet the weight of authority in the tone was unmistakable. Analysts later confirmed the file had been encrypted with methods rarely used outside government channels. To William, it meant the trail of secrecy reached higher than he dared imagine. Buried deep within a private archive at Althorpe, William uncovered a chest marked with his mother's initials. Inside, he found drafts of letters Diana had never sent, each one hinting at fears she carried in her final months. One note read of being watched from within, another of plans laid in silence. The words struck William with a force greater than any rumor or headline. They were his mother's warnings, preserved in her own hand. The revelations pressed heavily on William. Each uncovered file, each whispered recording, and each hidden letter drew a picture far darker than he had ever been told. It was no longer the tragedy the world mourned in 1997, it was beginning to look like a carefully managed event. And within its shadows stood names and places tied directly to his own family. Behind palace doors, silence grew heavier. Questions William raised in private meetings were met with careful pauses, vague replies, or sudden changes of subject. Each reaction only deepened his suspicion. What unsettled him most was not the denial, but the avoidance. It was as though those closest to him feared saying aloud what he was already beginning to piece together. One night, William received a call from a blocked number. When he answered, there was only silence followed by a faint click, and then the line went dead. Tracing it back later, investigators found it had originated from a secure channel used within royal estates. No explanation was offered. No record appeared in the official logs. It was as if the call had never existed. Piece by piece, the official story unraveled. What had long been presented as a tragic accident now showed cracks too wide to ignore. The files, the voices, the hidden letters all pointed to a version of events buried beneath layers of control. For William, the choice became clear. He could remain silent, protecting the crown's image, or he could confront the truth, no matter how deep it cut into the heart of his own family. Among the last discoveries was a report from a security officer once assigned to Diana. In it, he claimed her final days were marked by unusual surveillance cars that trailed at a distance, phones that clicked mid-conversation, faces that appeared more than once in different cities. The officer's account was filed, sealed, and forgotten, until now. For William, it was the final confirmation that his mother's fears had not been imagined, they had been real. With each clue uncovered, the distance between truth and silence narrowed. William realized the story told to the world was only a fragment, carefully shaped to protect those in power. Every file, every recording, every hidden note pulled him closer to a revelation that could fracture the monarchy itself. Yet with that knowledge came danger, for the closer he drew, the louder the warnings became. An anonymous envelope arrived at Kensington Palace. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words written in thick black ink: "Stop, or you'll fall." No signature, no return address, but the message was clear. Someone knew how close William was getting, and they wanted him to step back before he crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Alone in his study, William spread the files across the desk. Letters, contracts, recordings, each piece of evidence whispered the same truth. His mother's death was no simple twist of fate. But exposing it would mean tearing open wounds the crown had spent decades sealing. The decision was no longer about discovery, it was about survival, legacy, and the weight of history pressing against his own bloodline. Whispers began circling through the corridors of power. Advisors spoke in hushed tones, security grew tighter, and conversations stopped the moment William entered the room. It was clear the walls themselves knew what he had uncovered. The monarchy stood steady on the outside, but within, pressure built like a storm waiting to break. Through every trail he followed, one thread remained constant, an unseen figure pulling strings from the shadows. The contracts hinted at them, the calls deferred to them, and the voices never dared to speak their name. Whoever they were, their influence reached past the palace gates, past governments, into places where silence was bought and truth was buried. For William, uncovering their identity became the final key. William knew he had crossed a threshold. What began as a search for answers had become a confrontation with power itself. The deeper he went, the more impossible it became to turn back. Every discovery demanded a reckoning. Every silence confirmed his suspicions. Ahead lay only 2 paths: bury the truth forever, or bring it into the light, no matter the cost. Late one evening, security reported unfamiliar figures near the palace grounds. They disappeared before they could be identified, leaving only blurred footage and unanswered questions. To William, it was no coincidence. The closer he pressed toward the truth, the more the shadows seemed to gather at his very doorstep. Among the last files was a contract stamped, with a crest William recognized instantly, one tied directly to the highest office of the crown. The document was vague, yet its implications were unmistakable. This was no longer a mystery hidden in archives or whispered on tapes. It was written into the very fabric of the institution itself. And to challenge it would mean standing against the system he was born to inherit. William sat alone, surrounded by the fragments of decades-long secrecy. Every letter, every call, every encrypted file pointed toward the same unavoidable conclusion. He faced a choice that would define not just his life, but the legacy of the crown itself: to protect the institution at the cost of truth, or to confront it all and risk everything he had ever known. The more William uncovered, the clearer it became that a deliberate plan had been in motion for years. Transactions, letters, and covert communications all traced back to a network designed to control perception and silence dissent. Every revelation added weight to the idea that his mother's death had been manipulated, not merely tragic. And the closer he came to naming names, the higher the stakes grew. Surveillance records revealed patterns too precise to be accidental. Vehicles appeared at unexpected times, cameras captured fleeting shadows, and whispered instructions were passed without ever reaching ears beyond the palace walls. For William, it was proof that someone had been observing, calculating, and guiding events from the dark, always one step ahead of him. One evening, an anonymous message appeared on William's secure device: "Knowledge has a price. Beware the path you walk." No signature. No trace. But the warning was unmistakable. The closer he came to the truth, the more tangible the danger became, both to himself and those he loved. Every lead William pursued seemed to converge, forming a web of power and secrecy that extended far beyond the palace walls. Allies whispered caution, while foes remained unseen, but felt at every turn. It became clear, the deeper he delved, the more inescapable the grip of those orchestrating events from the shadows. Among the oldest files, William found fragments of conversations, diaries, and correspondences long thought lost. Each entry revealed intentions, fears, and strategies carefully hidden from public view. It was as if the past itself was speaking directly to him, warning that the truth carried consequences far greater than anyone had imagined. The evidence had brought William to a precipice. Every hidden file, whispered warning, and secret contract pointed toward a confrontation that could no longer be avoided. The question was no longer whether he would act, but how and whether the truth could survive the storm it was about to unleash. William understood the burden before him. Every revelation threatened to shake not only the foundations of his family, but the institution he was destined to lead. To act meant risking everything. To remain silent meant living with a secret that could haunt him forever. The weight of legacy had never felt heavier. In the shadows, someone within the palace began providing guidance. Notes, encrypted messages, and subtle hints appeared, directing William toward truths he could not access alone. Though their identity remained hidden, their support became a lifeline, a quiet ally in a game where every misstep carried immense risk. William began piecing together fragments of the past, letters, recordings, and encrypted documents. Each clue revealed layers of manipulation, secrets long buried, and a network of influence extending beyond anyone he had trusted. The full picture was emerging, and it was more dangerous and more personal than he had ever imagined. Among the files was a ledger, meticulously kept, tracing unexplained flows of money across years. Names, dates, and transactions connected dots that had been deliberately obscured. For William, it was proof that power had been wielded quietly, decisively, and that some of the most trusted figures in his world had played a role in shaping events he thought he understood. Every revelation only deepened the veil of secrecy. Meetings, letters, and covert communications revealed a network built to hide truth, protect reputations, and manipulate perception. William realized that uncovering it fully could dismantle decades of carefully constructed control and challenge the very fabric of the monarchy itself. The closer William drew to the truth, the more the palace seemed to shift around him. Conversations fell silent when he entered rooms, files disappeared, and subtle warnings crept into his daily life. It was clear that revealing what he knew would trigger a reckoning far beyond his personal struggle, one that could reshape the crown itself. Every lead pointed to a presence that remained just beyond sight. Decisions were influenced, movements anticipated, and messages sent through intermediaries whose faces were never known. For William, it became painfully clear. The enemy was not just powerful, it was invisible, patient, and always one step ahead. William felt the pressure mounting with each revelation. Every hidden document, whispered warning, and shadowed figure brought him closer to a breaking point. He knew the moment was coming when silence would no longer be an option, and when the consequences of truth could no longer be contained. The fragments of evidence converged into a story too dangerous to ignore. Each discovery pointed to manipulation, betrayal, and secrets carefully hidden by those in power. William stood at the edge of exposure, knowing that the next step could ignite a chain reaction with consequences reaching far beyond his control. Messages continued to arrive untraceable, chilling, and precise. "Turn back," one read. "Some truths are too dangerous." Every warning reminded William that his pursuit of justice carried risks, not only to himself, but to everyone around him. The silence of the palace had never felt so heavy. William knew the moment of choice had arrived. Every file, every whisper, every shadowed figure pointed toward a path from which there would be no return. To act meant confronting decades of secrecy and risking everything he loved. To stay silent meant living with a truth that could haunt the monarchy and his conscience forever. A figure emerged from the shadows, someone William had not expected, someone whose loyalty had remained unseen until now. Their guidance had been subtle, careful, yet now the mask was lifted. This ally held knowledge that could tip the balance, revealing secrets that others had fought to keep buried. Piece by piece, the network of secrecy began to unravel. Contracts, messages, and hidden agendas formed a map of manipulation stretching across decades. For William, the scope was staggering. The forces arrayed against him were vast, but so was the truth waiting to be exposed. Every revelation demanded courage William had never known he possessed. Facing the truth meant defying not just powerful figures, but the expectations of an entire nation. The challenge was clear. Courage would determine whether the secrets remained buried, or whether history would finally witness the unmasking of deception. Even as William gathered evidence, it became apparent that unseen forces guided every step. Decisions were anticipated, movements tracked, and every attempt at concealment was calculated to perfection. The presence of this hidden hand reminded him that the fight for truth was far from straightforward, and the consequences of exposure could be catastrophic. All paths led to a single point. William now faced the culmination of years of secrets, manipulation, and silence. Every choice, every risk, every whispered warning had led here. The moment of truth was unavoidable, and its outcome would shape not only his destiny, but the future of the crown itself. William finally acted, confronting the hidden forces behind decades of secrecy. Documents were laid bare, whispers transformed into accusations, and the palace itself seemed to hold its breath. The reckoning had begun, and there was no turning back. Every secret was now at the mercy of the light, and every consequence waiting to unfold. As truth surfaced, illusions carefully maintained for decades began to crumble. Trusted figures faltered under scrutiny, hidden motives were exposed, and the reality behind the crown's polished image became undeniable. William realized that nothing, and no one, would ever be the same again. The palace echoed with unspoken tension. Actions taken in secret were now visible, and the ripple effects of William's discoveries began to touch every corner of the institution. Some allies offered support, others recoiled, and the quiet fallout from the unveiled truths threatened to change everything forever. Buried files, anonymous messages, and shadowed meetings revealed truths long concealed. Names, events, and motives intertwined into a story no one outside the palace could have imagined. For William, understanding these hidden truths was both a revelation and a burden, one that demanded action despite the personal cost. The closer William came to exposing the full truth, the more unforgiving the path became. Every step forward risked retaliation, betrayal, and unforeseen consequences. Yet the weight of silence pressed heavier than any danger, and he understood that walking this path was not a choice, it was a necessity.